Sifter for the ear.
News, interviews, reviews, cinema, TV, streaming. Action.
Hi y'all, this is Jerry Williams, aka TV Jerry. Last April, I interviewed the directors of Anahita, a riveting documentary about a refugee from Afghanistan and her 5 children. It was just announced that the film won a Midwestern Regional Emmy in the documentary cultural category. I'll include a link to my podcast interview with the creators on the webpage for this show at tvjerry.com.
July 9th, 1929. I chose coming away because here at least I feel good. And it makes me feel I am growing very tall and straight inside, and very still. I have not wanted to be anything but kind to you, but there is nothing to be kind to you if I cannot be me. And me is something that reaches very far out into the world and all around, and kisses you. A very warm, cool, loving kiss.
That was an excerpt from the trailer for Georgia O'Keeffe, The Brightness of Light. It's the first major documentary on the artist since the 70s. Charlottesville filmmaker Paul Wagner directed the film, which will show at this year's Virginia Film Festival, October 30th through November 3rd. Paul and I have an interesting discussion about this fascinating woman, and John Kelly, the Virginia Film Festival rep, breaks some news about upcoming appearances at this year's festival.
Sifter Review of the Week.
Brothers on Prime Video. The fact that Peter Dinklage and Josh Brolin play twin brothers gives you some idea of the off-wall nature of this comedy. Plus, considering that Ethan Coen is half of the writing team, with Malcolm Blair, this solidifies the absurd angle. Tall brother has settled down into a marriage when short bro gets out of jail. He sucks his brother into a plan to recover the emeralds left behind by their criminal mother, played by Jen Landon and later by Glenn Close. Meanwhile, a vicious prison guard, Brendan Fraser, is in pursuit. Dinklage is great in these rowdy roles, while Brolin minds the laughs with a sweet, reluctant personality. Fraser and Close both provide additional humorous potential. Director Max Barbacow has kept the pace moving and created situations that amplify the humor. There aren't a lot of outright jokes, and the plot runs predictably, but the actors and the wacky energy provide sufficient fun for 90 minutes. I gave Brothers 3.5 out of 5 stars. You know, it's interesting because I've known your name forever. I've been toiling away as a Richmond director probably as long as you've been in Charlottesville toiling away. We've never met, but I've heard your name for years. So nice to meet you officially.
Well, likewise. Years going back, we were a little more active with the production.
VPA, right.
Yeah, VPA. But we just don't get over to Richmond for the meetings as much. You know, there's not a lot of activity here in Charlottesville for
Sure,
VP.
yeah. And, it's interesting. We just got back from a vacation about 2 weeks ago, and one of our stops was Basel, Switzerland.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, and of course, your movie starts in Basel, which was kind of interesting. And it was fascinating because I had no idea that, as you showed in the movie, that most people there didn't even know who Georgia O'Keeffe was.
Yeah,
that shocked me.
Yeah, that was one of the things that surprised us. That show that we filmed, those people we talked to, they were sort of typical. You know, a couple of the women knew who she was, but all the men and many of the women had never heard of her. And they were just going, wow, this is amazing, you know.
Yeah. So why did you start with that? That was kind of an interesting way to start. It's like, wait a minute, this is weird.
Well, first of all, I think it's helpful in a film like we created to remind people who she is and what her art looks like. Right. And so that was a way to, kind of get the camera in a gallery, get a representative sampling of the types of paintings, the skyscrapers, the flowers, the bones, but then to kind of put a little spin on it. And so it was a way to say, hey, it's okay. If you've never heard of her, you're going to love it. If you've heard of her, you're going to love it. So
even more, yeah.
I know it was a little idiosyncratic to do that, but I thought it might kind of be, kind of a little unexpected way to open the film.
It was, absolutely, yeah. Now, there have been several documentaries on Georgia O'Keeffe, including the one on PBS that you got excerpts from. So what makes yours different? Why did you decide to do one?
The film that was made on PBS, for PBS, that film was made in 1977.
Right.
And if you go on YouTube, for example, and Google, Georgia O'Keeffe film, a lot of things come up.
Yep.
But really, if you look at them, they're little short things put together, and all of them use the footage from that 77 film.
Right.
So really, the only thing out there pretty much, if certainly for American-made films, is that film, which is a terrific film by Perry Miller-Adoto, who is an excellent filmmaker. And she shot it in 77. And she has something that we didn't have and that nobody will ever have, which is George O'Keeffe on camera.
I know, that was amazing.
But the funny thing about it is that's almost 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And in that 50 years, a lot of things have happened that made it possible for us to make a film that had something that she didn't have, which is specifically 25,000 pages of letters between O'Keeffe and Stieglitz that were not released until 20 years after O'Keeffe's death.
Footnote.
His reference to Stieglitz is Alfred Stieglitz, a prominent American photographer and a modern art promoter.
If you think about it, that opens a window on her as an artist and as a woman that even the real person sitting there in front of the camera couldn't provide.
Right.
Because, of course, as great as that film is, it's kind of O'Keeffe according to O'Keeffe. She is this powerful, dynamic person. She kind of presents herself as she wishes to present herself, which is not a criticism of Perry Miller-Adoto by any means.
Right. There was another 60s documentary. Was that something you just found and that was like a treasure surprise?
Yeah.
Or?
As far as we know, that had not been seen since it was shown, I guess, on NBC in 1964. She's not a young woman, but she's much younger than she is in the 77 film.
Yeah.
And you can feel it. She comes across as kind of a different person. And the funniest thing about that film is everybody, as we were working on the film, everybody said, oh, yeah, anytime there was a photographer or filmmaker, George O'Keeffe always wore black and she never wore makeup. She was never seen in makeup. And of course, in that film, she's wearing a turquoise dress and she's got lipstick, bright red lipstick and eyeliner.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, this is unusual. So,
Yeah, and you mentioned that all those letters, they were really fascinating because she didn't just write letters, she drew them and designed them. Her art was all over the letters, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, to me, that's so revealing of her personality. Yes, she was an artist, so her letters had kind of an artistic element, which is a point made in the film. But she was a very idiosyncratic and powerful personality.
Now, what does the title mean?
The way we came to the title, in the 70s, I guess it was around 75, O'Keeffe wrote an autobiography. I put that in quotes because it was really a collection of paintings with some text. And she begins, the first line of that autobiography is, "My first memory is of the brightness of light."
Right.
And she goes on to describe this incident where she had a memory from when she couldn't even walk. She was just a few months old, that she remembered, and a few years later mentioned this to her mother, and her mother said, "Oh, you're making that up. You couldn't have remembered that. You couldn't even walk." And she describes the memory in detail, and her mother kind of goes, "Well, I do remember that, so maybe you are remembering it." It's hard to put your finger on it, but somehow it's a doorway into understanding who she was as a person, who she was as an artist, and just an awareness of light, and the intensity of the light was something that was kind of a marker. And her art is so much about the way one human being reacts to the world. And so I love that phrase. And it also then, for me as a filmmaker, it kind of became a touchstone. We use a lot of shots where the sun is blasting right into the camera lens, The very last image of the film is O'Keeffe sitting in the morning with the sun coming up behind her, and she's just washed her hair and she's drying her hair with her back to the morning sun, and the camera's looking at this empty chair with the sun rising up over a hillside blasting into the lens.
Right. That's a great last shot. I never knew that she lived in Williamsburg and Charlottesville, and I want to ask you about that.
Surprise guest drop in.
But before I do, somebody from Charlottesville's dropped in to say hello.
Hey, John.
Hey, Paul. Hi, Jerry.
Hi, good to see you again.
Footnote.
John is John Kelly, who's the public relations manager for the Virginia Film Festival. It popped up on Facebook today that my documentary on Dirt Woman premiered at the Virginia Film Festival 6 years ago. It's been that long already.
That's true.
Paul, I'm sure this is not your first film at the Virginia Film Festival, is it?
Oh, gosh, no. We've had a bunch of them over the years. I'd have to pull out my records to remember how many. It's been a little bit of a while. You mentioned it was 6 years ago. It's been almost that long for us because we've been working on this O'Keeffe film for 5 years.
Well, so John, there's so many exciting and cool movies coming this year. Why don't you give us some of the highlights of what's going to make this year's festival so spectacular?
I want to hear this too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things too, Jerry, when you think about what we do as a festival, we are known for these top Hollywood hits. We are known for top foreign films around the country. We're known for Virginia films. Having Paul here in Charlottesville is an awesome opportunity for us to not only highlight a Virginia filmmaker, but also to promote the world-class filmmaking that we have in the festival year after year. And this year is really no exception. I mean, we have an outstanding program of more than 130 films. Well, we start with, Enora, which is, a film that really has been dominating conversation around the festival season and became the first film in 13 years, I believe, to win the Palme d'Or in Cannes, first American film. You're really hot off the presses here. We're just announcing that Mikey Madison, who's the breakout star of that film, will be joining us at the festival for opening night.
Terrific.
Great.
And the other announcement is that Matthew Modine will be joining us.
Oh, great.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
He's going to be doing a special screening of Birdie at the Paramount, and he will be talking about a film that he made called I Hope This Helps, that he executive produced, about AI.
Oh, wow.
Oh, cool.
But then, on top of that, we have Amelia Perez, which is really, again, sort of sweeping the festival season. All four of its female leads won Best Actress at Cannes, which is unprecedented.
Wow.
And that's our centerpiece film. We say this all the time, but there's truly something for everybody in this festival. A Piano Lesson, which is the third that Denzel Washington has produced of the August Wilson series. And his son, Malcolm Washington, is directing it. And John David Washington is starring in it.
Wow,
so
real
it's
family
a
affair.
true family affair. Yeah. And so it's a powerful film. And that's another one of the highlights of this year.
It's always a great festival. I always enjoy it when I come, and there's beautiful scenery outside and beautiful movies inside. All right. Thank you so much, John.
Good to see you, John. I will definitely be there.
That's really good for us to know. I'll tell Ilya.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Take care.
So let's go back to talking about your Georgia O'Keeffe documentary, The Brightness of Light, and tell us about her living in Williamsburg and Charlottesville.
She was born in Wisconsin in a farming community called Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, on the prairie. But his father, and all his brothers died over a period of years in the late 19th century of tuberculosis. At the time, it wasn't quite understood what caused people to get tuberculosis. And in his mind, it was because of these cold winters. So he said, hell with this. He actually saw a brochure put out by the local business people in Williamsburg, Virginia, about how wonderful it was, and it's warm. And so he, without ever visiting there, moves the family to Williamsburg.
After Williamsburg, she ended up in Charlottesville. Was that what prompted you to make this movie, or did that just a surprise to you too?
Yeah, what happened was their kind of family fortunes declined in Williamsburg, and on top of that, her mother contracted tuberculosis, of all things.
So much for the cold weather.
Yeah, exactly. So at any rate, they moved to Charlottesville, and they really didn't have that much money. They couldn't buy a house. They rented a house, and she ran it as a boarding house for UVA students. So the house is still standing today. It's on Wirtland Avenue, and there's a historical marker out front that indicates that O'Keeffe lived there.
It's interesting because you had a very comprehensive visit of her life. You not only went to Charlottesville and Williamsburg, you went to every place she lived and worked.
Yep.
You had numerous experts you were interviewing during this. What was the surprise? What was something you found that you did not know or learn during that process?
Well, this kind of goes back to the impression you have of O'Keeffe from that 1977 film. She seems to be this brilliant, powerful presence and personality. And what I didn't realize until we got deeper into the research and then interviews was she had terrible, terrible emotional issues at various points in her life. For example, she would never have talked about it, and she never did talk about it much. But in late 1932, she had what we would describe today as a nervous breakdown. In the 1977 interview, she's not talking about that at all. But that was something that's really vivid in the letters. And she talks about, the challenges she was facing. And she also has some lovely letters about sort of what brought her out of it, what, helped her emerge from this depression and funk. It's not only interesting to see that, but it reminds you, we tend with artists, particularly a great artist like O'Keeffe, you tend to think, oh, it's easy for them. They're a great artist. Every time they sit down to paint, it's another masterpiece. It's no big deal. And you forget they're a human being and they face the same challenges that all of us face in our work. To me, it's so refreshing and revealing to realize she suffered terribly in that year. And for all her powers as a woman and as a great artist, there was nothing she could do. She was totally depressed and stymied. And until she got out of it, she wasn't doing any painting at all.
Now, you mentioned the 77 footage again. One thing I thought was interesting as a filmmaker, which I really enjoyed, because usually when you see footage, old footage that's shot 4:3 ratio, they put it in the middle of the screen and they just have it black on both sides with columns.
Yeah.
But you moved it over to the left side and used the right side, black space, to put in the text, which I thought was a really interesting use of 4:3 footage.
The style of the film is actually pretty traditional. It kind of draws on what I would now call classic PBS approach of old footage, old photos, obviously the paintings of the artist, and the interviews with experts, and that sort of thing. So it's traditional in that way. We tried to also make it beautiful, to kind of follow on O'Keeffe's sense of what she tried to do in her painting. And so we tried to work in a few little subtle artistic elements, such as what we called the quads, where instead of a single old photograph, we would bring in 4 photographs and kind of bring them in sequentially or change them sequentially, or maybe 3 are static and 1 has a zoom in on it or something like that.
And sometimes you even twisted them.
Yeah. And also just something, again, for you as a filmmaker, Jerry, I'm thinking about presenting her art. And, one thing is when you're working with art, of course, as a filmmaker, you like to zoom in and get the close up and the vivid colors and everything. But there's actually a requirement when you show her art, you have to at some point show the whole painting.
Right.
So we do zoom in and move around and twist them, torque them, as you say. At some point, you see the whole painting. Well, 90% of those paintings are verticals.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with a 16:9 frame. So you're like, what? I'm going to spend half the film with an image in the middle and just a lot of black bars on the right.
Yeah.
So we came up with this idea. Well, wait a minute. Why not sometimes put up 2 paintings so that you're, more efficiently using the canvas of the film frame, or put up a painting on one side of the frame and the interviewee. So we took a lot of those interviews, which were, of course, shot 16:9, and we chopped them in half.
Right.
So that you just see the person. Then you have a lot of fun playing with, when the person comes in, when the painting comes in, when it's 2 paintings or whatever. So it kind of opened up a creative avenue that was really fun to play with, even though it's pretty subtle, and not super radical.
Right. But it did work. Now, Claire Danes was the voice of Georgia O'Keeffe in this. How did you get Claire involved?
At a certain level, it's just like working through the agent, trying to find a fee that they're satisfied with. We had 2 roles to cast, the narrator and the voice of O'Keeffe, which we wanted, of course, to be 2 different voices. So we came up with the idea of, gosh, Claire Danes would be great as the voice. And we thought of Hugh Dancy, who is her husband. It's not even mentioned in the film. But Hugh Dancy is our narrator. So at the same time, they have separate agents. We sent out queries to the agents and started the process of trying to hire both of them with the thought that, well, maybe there'll be some synergy and that it might motivate him or her or both to, give us a better price and to be more cooperative, more interested in the project. It's hard for me to say that really happened, but will tell you one thing. We were making progress with him, but not much progress with her as the voice of O'Keeffe. And we went into a New York studio and recorded his voice doing the narration. And an hour after we finished, we got a call from her agent saying she was interested in working with it.
Good.
So I think what happened was, I think he went home and said, okay, they're unheard of documentary filmmakers, but they're not totally idiots. So maybe it's okay for you to do this.
By the way, I did hear one other little voiceover in there briefly that sounds vaguely like the one I'm hearing now.
Oh, yeah. What am I in there? I'm the voice of Newsweek, I think.
Newsweek, exactly. Yeah.
I do the Newsweek thing. I thought that would be fun. A little Alfred Hitchcock moment, right?
I was just going to say your Hitchcock moment. Exactly.
That's right.
And one of the things I really enjoyed, too, going back to being a filmmaker, of course, obviously, a lot of times you have different sound bites back to back. They build on each other. But there was
Yeah.
one sequence near the end where there were 2 or 3 women and they were almost finishing each other's sentences.
Yeah.
Was that just happenstance?
In this film, and actually a number of films, I'm very aggressive about how I edit the interviews. It's not that the interviewee isn't interesting, and very often it'll work to let them kind of just in real time, play out a long statement.
Right.
But I think it's also fun to kind of vary the rhythm from scene to scene. So, one technique I use is a lot of the questions that I ask of every interviewee.
Sure, yeah.
You know what I mean? So that I know I'm going to have several people talking about the same topic. And that opens the door to the kind of editing that you're talking about, where you can take 2 people talking about something and be able to bounce back and forth. But I love that. I love editing. I love the process of editing. And that's an example of, what that gives you, I think.
That makes a documentary. The editing is really what makes a documentary, I think, a lot of times.
Yeah, exactly.
What are the plans for distribution on the movie?
We have a company that we haven't worked with before. It's APT Worldwide, which is American Public Television Worldwide, their international distribution arm. PBS obviously is much better known than APT, but APT's, been around for a while, and they have strengthened their international facing operation. Actually, in just about a week, is taking the film to MIPCOM, which is, I forget what it stands for actually, but it's like a film festival, but inside the industry. It's just, the buyers from European countries, territories, from Asian territories, from South America, and also streaming services. So they'll present the film and hopefully we'll have some sales in that way, get the film out to the public.
Is there anything specific about the movie that you think people would find interesting that you might want to mention that I haven't asked you about?
I mentioned already that we see the iconic Georgia O'Keeffe as less than iconic. And I think that's an important thing, because the whole goal of the film is to reveal the humanity of this woman who we think of as so great and so iconic, and to be able to say, yes, that's true, but to strip that away and see who the human being is. And the key to it really are those letters. And I really went out of my way to muddy up the story, I would say. And I'll give us an example. There's a scene where she's at the beach and she's in love. This is the mid-20s, 1920s. She's in love with Alfred Stieglitz, but she's also struggling with this idea of, well, I also want to be my own self. And we take 2 letters. They were released in the 2000s, but have hardly ever been read. And she says, in the first letter, she says, being here by myself, it gives me a feeling of quiet, but being a whole person that I rather like. I seem to be only a very small fraction of a person when you're around. I believe I like to be a whole one all by myself. Today we would say, yeah, she's a woman, she's a feminist. She doesn't need a man to feel a whole human being. Okay, a few days later, she writes another letter to him where she says, I'll censor this a little bit, I am on my back waiting for you, and goes on to very explicit sexual letter. But to me, I love that, because you realize human beings, we're complicated. Of course, she wants to be a strong woman standing on her own, but hey, she's a human being. At the time, she loves this guy and, is desperate to be with him. That is so revelatory to say, yes, this is what being a human being is. It's complicated, it's contradictory, but it's deeply human.
Good point. And one question I always like to ask everybody last is, when you're not working on your own documentary, what do you like to watch on TV or in movies?
Like everybody, I guess, we're suckers for these streaming series.
Oh, yeah.
We just watched Pachinko, the series that was terrific. We just watched the Monkey show.
Oh, yeah, Bad Monkey.
Bad Monkey, thank you.
With Vince Vaughn, yeah. I'm almost finished
Vince
with that
Vaughn.
one.
Oh, it's great. Okay, I won't spoil it for you. We work and film all day, but after dinner, it's kind of nice to have a glass of wine and just kick back and watch something. And of course, we're in an era. I have very mixed feelings about it. Obviously, people are not going to movie theaters as much. That's one of the joys of film festivals, isn't it? That you're back in a theater. But as you know, commercially, the theaters are a little bit in decline. You can sort of understand it, because what's offered on streaming in these series, that's where a lot of the talent is working now.
Alfonso Cuarón has got his first series.
Yeah,
now.
exactly. We just started that one.
Disclaimer.
He's a filmmaker. It's a different format. And yes, it was wonderful to watch Roma in a theater, but he's really a terrific director. The talent on screen, the script is fantastic. It's hard to complain about that.
Yeah. Well, Paul, I want to thank you. It's great to finally get a chance to meet you virtually here, and good luck with the film. It was wonderful. I learned a lot about Georgia O'Keeffe. I didn't know. We, by the way, were in Santa Fe 2 years ago and did go to the museum, too. So,
oh, cool. Yeah. We're on our way to Santa Fe, actually, for the Santa Fe International Film Festival. The film is premiering there and then coming to Virginia 2 weeks later.
You'll be in Charlottesville to do Q&A after the movie?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Well, great to finally meet you, Jerry. Thanks so much for doing the interview. Appreciate it.
That was Paul Wagner, longtime Charlottesville filmmaker, talking about his new documentary, Georgia O'Keeffe, The Brightness of Light. It'll have its Virginia premiere at this year's Virginia Film Festival that runs from October 30th through November 3rd. And I'll have links to the websites for the film and the festival on the page for this show at tvjerry.com.
Coming soon. In theaters.
Since I'm actually out of town this week, I didn't get a full list of openings for the weekend, but here are the two that are definite. Venom: The Last Dance. Tom Hardy is back for another movie as the Marvel monster kinda hero. On the other end of the spectrum is Conclave. Ralph Fiennes plays a cardinal in charge of selecting the new pope, but things go sideways. Also with John Lithgow, Stanley Tucci, and Isabella Rossellini.
TV and streaming.
The Remarkable Life of Evelyn on Netflix. Mats Steen, a Norwegian gamer, died of a degenerative muscle disease at age 25. His parents mourned what they thought would be a lonely and isolated life when they started receiving messages from online friends around the world. Don't Move on Netflix. It follows a seasoned killer as he injects a grieving woman with a paralytic agent. She must run, fight, and hide before her body shuts down. Starring Finn Wittrock. Road Diary, Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band on Hulu and Disney. This is a documentary which chronicles the behind-the-scenes preparation for Springsteen's 23-24 World Tour. Territory on Netflix. When a massive Lawson cattle station lacks an heir, Australia's rival factions see a chance to seize control. Lioness on Paramount Plus, a new season starring Zoe Saldana as a CIA operative. The Diplomat on Netflix, Season 2 of Kerry Russell playing the U.S. Ambassador to England. This is Jerry Williams. Thanks for listening.
For more Sister, including literally thousands of reviews,
Visit tvjerry.com.
That's a wrap.